Welcome to the Buck Stops here, the official podcast and audio program of NotInHallOfFame.com, and I'm your host, the Buck, Kirk Buchner, owner, operator of NotInHallOfFame.com, and its subsidiary sites, the Fictitious Athlete Hall of Fame, the Fictitious Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Today I'm going back into my youth, and I've got the chance to talk to Dangerous Danny Davis, former referee turned wrestler. You may remember him at WrestleMania 3 in his match with the Hart Foundation against the British Bulldogs and Tito Santana, at a Battle Royal in the opening one at WrestleMania 4. And he had lots of great programs in wrestling against also Santana, but the Birdman, Coco Beware, and all of your favorites from the late 80s. And I got a chance to catch up with him, see how he's doing, and he's reflecting on his life, not just as Dangerous Danny Davis, but as the masked Mr. X, an underneath worker from the 2 years prior to his emergence as the corrupt official. Not just the corrupt official or the bad guy referee. He was the best bad guy referee. He's going to tell you that himself. He's also got a book coming out, which is certainly worth checking out. Here he is, Mr. X, Dangerous Danny Davis. 3, 2, 1. I am here with the dangerous one, Danny Davis. Is it safe to say the most corrupt official in WWE history, or the smartest one? You figured out how to put your name on the map a little bit more than most.
What they call me is Dangerous Danny Davis, the world famous bad guy referee, and that's how I'm known.
Nice.
As the bad guy referee. To this day, I still go out and do independent shows. They bring me in for tag matches and other matches when they want to have a finale on a tag match. I mean, a championship match or whatever. They bring me in as my character, Dangerous Danny Davis.
So, still doing sort of backhanded officiating then? Showing a bit of favoritism, are we?
I call everything right down the middle, Kirk. You know, there's no gray area there. I'm right down the middle. The shoulders are down. They're counted. You know, I don't take any guff from anybody, and that's the way it is. A lot of people don't like that, and that's too bad.
Nice. So prior to our conversation, I was watching a lot more of your older matches, and not just the matches, but just the build up to the long build-up for the eventual payoff at WrestleMania 3, which I certainly I'm looking forward to getting to. But and as I mentioned to you beforehand, I had no idea that you were the masked Mr. X until 15 years later, when the website WrestleCrap mentioned that you were one of their favorite wrestlers, and how they were so excited to sort of learn that was you. And then that's how I learned.
Yes. It's amazing, ain't it? If you go to my website, Dangerous Danny Davis on Facebook, you'll see that there was almost a slip-up there years ago when Bruno Sammartino was one of the commentators with Vince McMahon, and we were doing a tag match. And he almost exposed me. He stopped himself in his tracks. He said something like, "Oh, yes, Danny, Mr. X." He corrected himself, and they walked over, but that was... Yes, it was almost exposed there at one point in time. But yes, I was Mr. X for many, many, many years that people didn't know. And again, I've written a book about it. It's part of the book, the story of Mr. X, the true story of Dangerous Danny Davis, and that's part of the book. And it's very exciting how that happened.
Yeah, and I got to talk with your co-writer, Kenny Casanova, and he was kind enough to put us together. And just special shout out to Kenny for this.
Listen, you don't care who you... Listen, be careful who you call your friend.
Don't trust anyone.
Mr. Casanova, you got to look out for that guy, you know?
Nice.
Well, Mr. Kenny's a good friend of mine, and we worked very hard on the book. It took us a couple of years to do the book and get it finalized and get it published, and a lot of fans that I have never had anybody respond to the book in a negative way. Everybody who's read it is either so surprised that it's unlike any other wrestling book they've read, and it's really exciting. and it's an inspirational book for young people as well as old, and I hope that a lot of people enjoy it and have an opportunity to read it.
Now, Danny, do you watch the current product on WWE or AEW or anything like on the national stage?
Well, what I do lately, I have, because I am going to do a thing with Bill After to analyze what today's wrestling as opposed to my day of wrestling, and I haven't watched it in years. And I turned around the other night, and lo and behold, it was the same people. After a couple of years, it was the same names, the same characters. There were a few different people there, but it was basically the same people, and I was very surprised that, their product is just repetitive, I guess.
One thing that's certainly different from when you were competing as Mr. X than on today, and obviously the business has sort of changed where television is the main focus as opposed to getting people in house shows. The role of the enhancement worker isn't as prevalent as it was back then, and you were one of a slew of great wrestlers who were just phenomenal at getting in just the right amount of offense and making a win over yourself, or look like it really mattered. So you were part of that little.
Well, that was it. Yes, we were very well versed on what we had to do, and the more you did, the better you did. The more the guys would want, the people that were getting pushed, as it were, would want to work with you. And I was one of the top ones that was as they call it back then, doing jobs for everybody. And everybody in this industry has done jobs at one point in time in their life. And from Hulk Hogan down to, you can name them. They've all done jobs at one point in their time. And the job of someone doing a job, the business of it, was to get these guys over. And as you said, the better you were at it, the more you had exposure. You were getting exposure. As Mr. X, I wrestled all the greats. Bruno Sammartino and his son in a tag team match. I worked with all the top stars and got them over. And to my credit, when we did house shows, I would also work with some top stars there too. So yes, if they don't do that today, I don't know why, or whether it's they don't have the time, or the business has evolved in that direction, I guess, and they don't need enhancers.
Mm-hmm. Because the group of people that I've always sort of associated with, and I'm not talking about some of the people that you would see regularly on television, like in the old days of, I think, was it Wrestling Challenge or Wrestling Superstars, the one that was taped in Poughkeepsie. So like for some would get offense, and yourself being one of them, but like the AJ Petrucci's, Mario Mancini, they all seem to be Italian now that I think about it. Gino Carabello.
Well, there was a lot. There was Brian Costello, there was Mike Bell, there was Barry Howitz, of course, Frankie Williams, Terry Gibbs, Dwayne Gill, Phil Apollo, Scott Casey. The list goes on and on. S.D. Jones, Special Delivery Jones. The list goes on and on.
But I think we're one of the...
They were great. Mm-hmm. But see, this is what I don't understand why. And I know that the fans were programmed to like and enjoy and people like Hogan and the guys on top, but the people who got them there, people like myself and these people we mentioned, the people who got them there don't get the recognition they should. Mm-hmm. And I think there should be. And I went online there the other day, and I guess there is a Jobbers Hall of Fame somewhere. And so I really don't understand why more of them aren't in the Hall of Fame. Why they aren't considered. Why they don't get as much recognition as they should. They do these conventions, and again, the people that were enhancers don't get an opportunity to meet the fans or get the same opportunities as someone like that was on top. And it's a shame that we don't get more recognition as enhancers, as they say today. But and I find that very, very I don't know. More people should be considered in a conversation when they talk about wrestling in that day.
Mm-hmm. When I was a kid and sort of watching like back in like the Poughkeepsie tapings and then everything that went on at that Allentown, everything that sort of happened in 85, 86, I always sort of saw that there was sort of like a certain level if you were one of the guys who were losing on a regular basis, but if you were sort of like featured on one of the weekly shows, like I think it was Primetime Wrestling where they would show some matches, like clearly you were at that level where they're putting you on the road. And in your case, what sort of separated that in my 13-year-old mind was, hey, well, Mr. X has got to be somebody. He's in the Land of a Thousand Dances video.
Right. I mean, I did it all. I mean, I was fortunate, that I was put in those positions. And again, I was well liked in the way I put people over. And as you pointed out, it was extremely a lot of pressure at times, to get these guys over. I mean, we were just a stepping stone, and of course, they would go on to, another level of talent, and eventually be on top. Don Morocco's and Jimmy Snookers and all those guys that would get put over. They eventually had to work together, and again, whoever was on the losing end of that wasn't considered a jobber, but again, they were doing jobs to get somebody else over, and that was the business.
And there was quite a few who were at that sort of similar level who were clearly talented wrestlers. One you worked with, it looks like quite a bit, Leaping Lanny Poffo.
Leaping Lanny Poffo, one of the top guys. He was a heck of a wrestler. His father was a wrestler, of course. Who his brother was,
Mm-hmm.
Macho Man, and he was a hell of a worker. He was more of a step, I think, a little bit a step above a jobber, but he did jobs, and he did them the right way, as everybody else did, and kept himself, in the mix. And I think that was due to his ability, and I give him a pat on the back every time. In fact, I was with him a few months ago. Him and I did a show in a local show here, and we talked for hours and hours and hours because that's how long it's been since we've seen each other. But unfortunately, yeah, he's doing great, and he still does some shows once in a while also.
Can he still do the moonsault?
I wouldn't say yes, but I wouldn't say no. But he's in pretty good shape. He's still in good shape.
Yeah, but I guess that's why you went with the Boston Crab.
Oh, no, nothing like the Boston Crab. I mean, we had a lot of fun with that, didn't we? Huh?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Mr. X did all right too, and some of the house shows, Mr. X would go, be put over.
Yes,
and that was because now when they see him on TV, as you pointed out at the top of the conversation here, people would say, "Well, he won it. I saw him, 2 weeks ago in wherever, Pennsylvania, and he won. So maybe he can, maybe he's going to win tonight." So that was the idea.
Right, and it's sort of, and that's, I always, there's got to be a science to it, giving you just the right amount of offense to give like the Tito Santanas, the Ricky Steamboats of the world that much more credibility. Even though you pretty much know that they're going to beat you, you've got to have that give and take. Otherwise, what did they beat?
Well, that's what being a professional is all about, Kirk. Mm-hmm. When you get in the ring, you're going to do as much as you can. For the more the people you're putting over let you do what you're saying, get over a little bit on them, makes them look better too because now they've beaten somebody. Mm-hmm. You understand?
Absolutely.
They haven't beat. There were some guys that they just went in and squashed. It was called being squashed. You go in 1 minute, 2 minutes, bang. But a professional wrestler will know how much to let the guy who's putting them over to have in the match to create the illusion or the fact that maybe this guy's going to beat him,
And as such, I mean, when you're on TV that much, I mean, you're developing, quite a fan base. One thing I wanted to ask you is, did you ever, and I imagine the answer is yes, did you ever referee as Danny Davis and then compete as Mr. X in the same card?
Oh, yeah. I used to go into an arena and I'd set up the ring, I'd set up chairs, I'd do concessions, I'd go out and referee, then I'd wrestle as Dangerous Danny Day. I mean, as Mr. X, and I would come back and I would change clothes and I'd do the match after next as the referee again, and then at the end of the show, I would take it all down and move to the next town.
Did you have a favorite arena
and stuff like that? But yes, but no one ever realized that I was doing that.
No, I certainly didn't. Did you have a favorite place to wrestle? Like, would it be Boston Gardens, maybe?
Well, my favorite place to wrestle was, you know, growing up being in the business, you hear about these great places like the Cow Palace in California and New York, Madison Square Garden, Boston Garden. But I think, you know, a favorite place. I don't think there was a favorite place, but there were places I enjoyed going more than most, and those three that I had mentioned were probably my top three. And seeing the world and going over to the Middle East and going to Australia and, you know, in Europe and Germany and France and all those countries was quite an exciting thing for me too. And I went as Mr. X, you know, and I went as Dangerous Danny Davis also. So yeah, that was my favorite part was probably the travel and seeing the different countries.
Nice. Well, one thing I want to sort of like bring up, and I know we've already talked about this before in our first conversation, but again, it's my favorite Mr. X match. One that I was at live at the Toronto Maple Leaf Gardens, and I actually rewatched it again on YouTube, realizing a couple things that I've forgotten about. It was November at Maple Leaf Gardens against the Honky Tonk Man, who was in the middle of getting his vote of confidence, and that hadn't been aired yet. And Honky Tonk Man, in many interviews, has said that it was a big mistake for him to come in as a babyface, and he was right. I mean, like, I remember thinking as a 14-year-old kid, why would I want to cheer for an Elvis impersonator? That's my dad's generation. And even then, he would want to cheer for the real Elvis.
Yes.
And
well,
yeah, you in that match, you were cheered and I went back. It's like there was an X chant that I forgot about, and I'm sure I participated in.
Yes, and as we talked about, you know, you asked me how did that feel and stuff like that. Was there confusion and stuff like that? And again, it goes back to being a professional. You have your match. You work with the people. You let the people, you know, do what they're going to do, but you work with them. But we had our match, and it went as planned, as you know, and it was a great feeling. And afterwards, I was complimented on how well I kept my cool and did what I was supposed to do, and let the match just go as it was. And that's how you learn. That's your education. And being complimented after by the guy you're working with is always important, and also extremely gratifying. So yes, after the match, you know, I was congratulated and said I did a good job keeping my head, et cetera, et cetera. So that makes me feel pretty good, because I was in the learning phase, you know, of the wrestling, you know, per se, actually hands-on. So it's pretty exciting when that happens to you.
Because I would imagine you're almost trying to fight off the feeling to play to the crowd as a face. And you had to suppress that.
Match. You let the people do what they want to do, you know? And but you got to stay focused. You got to remember what you're doing there, and don't try to. Because if I had tried to do, you know, take it, you know, carry it too far, it wouldn't have been as good as it was. I just kept my cool, did the thing, and did our match, and that's the way it was. Mm-hmm. He did most of it. So yeah, I again, one of the great guys. I've worked with a lot of great people, and he was one of them. And
then a few months later, you're in the same stable.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which again, I had no idea at that time.
So that's the wrestling business.
Yeah, and the one sort of thing also too, sort of like going back to then and now, the seeds, they were planting so many seeds about your you being this duplicitous referee. So I think they brought that out in August, from what I'm reading on some research on that, August of '86, until sort of like paying that off finally with the tag team title change, with the British Bulldogs losing to the Hart Foundation.
Right, and so that happened in Florida.
Right. So like, how do they first approach you, or do you even know that where this is
No,
going?
I had no idea. I didn't have a clue what they were going to do. One day they said, "This is what you're going to do," and we went out and did it, did the match, and then the next. See, people don't realize you did 2 or 3 hours at a taping. In other words, we did all 3 segments, as they call them, in one place, one night. But it was aired at different times, like and consecutive weeks, so that they could follow the storyline. But we did it in one arena in one night. So after that, with the British Bulldogs, the next segment I came out as Dangerous Danny Davis, but of course that wasn't aired the same day.
Mm-hmm.
It was aired the following week, with Jimmy Hart and Dangerous Danny Davis outfit with the stripes and stuff like that. And then it went on from there. People didn't realize, I don't know if they still do, but sometimes you do 3 or 4 weeks at one taping, because it's like from 8 o'clock at night till midnight. It's quite a long day, but that's how they did it back then, so that the storyline would be continuing every week. So it was kind of an exciting day down there in Florida that night. I was hated, and all the segments were put together on the TV. It was a little different because they cut and they edit, but it was quite a. On my way is Dangerous Danny Davis, and of course it went to WrestleMania 3, and and the rest is history.
Yeah, and that's what I didn't understand then, which I do now, realizing that you were Mr. X. Because when you came out in your wrestling gear, it's like, why is he wearing an all white shirt?
Yeah, because I had tattoos.
Right, and that's what I didn't realize at the time.
That would have given everything away. Yes.
Yeah. So not only that too. I think. And you're physically built, very well, and I think it also worked to your advantage, where your build was not actually being shown.
Exactly. But it was all part of this, the grand scheme of things, and who came up with that? Well, it's because of me. I had those tattoos on, and it was done that way so no one would know what was going on. Mm-hmm. And it worked. So I'm not going to say, I didn't like it, I liked it. I just did what I was asked to do, and that's why I was trying to eventually cut the sleeves off, and they said absolutely not. Mm-hmm. Because people reckon, people aren't stupid. The fans aren't stupid. They'll realize right away what was going on. So
right, and I think we need to sort of explain to younger fans that, because back in the 80s, not a lot of people had tattoos.
Exactly, and my tattoos weren't exactly the top grade either at that time. So again,
I'm trying to think. It was you, Harley Race, and Billy Jack Haynes. The only 3 I can remember having tattoos in the 80s in the WWF.
Yes, Vince McMahon was dead set against tattoos, because in his mind it was a sign of uneducated and street kind of stuff, and he didn't like that. He was trying to create a product that was above that, get away from that.
Right.
The old schools, and so he frowned on tattoos, especially ones that weren't very attractive.
So now in 1987, after that, now you're wrestling some of the same people who you put over as Mr. X, but now you're winning some of these matches. Is it a different mentality, or how do you sort of now get more offense in your head when your instinct is almost to sort of give a lot more in the ring? Was that hard transition for you?
No, it's again, and I keep repeating it. I don't know how. It's professionalism. You respect the guys you're working for, and they respect you, no matter if you're on top. That's what I was trying to get at when you asked me how'd you know how much to do and how much to give. And it's professionalism. You know what you have to do. You do it without hurting anybody else in terms of popularity, or you don't bury him, or you give a hell of a match. And no, you just take that next step. And they're all steps in wrestling. You know, there's doing jobs, and then there's going over a little bit, and then there's, again, like you said, knowing when, knowing how, and again, respecting each other. And you show respect, you get respect. If you don't, then they won't even work with you. You know, they'll squash you, or they, refuse to work with you. But you show professionalism at all times and respect for everybody, and your career will bloom.
So I want to bring a few names here up and just sort of like get your opinion on them, or just like were they great to work with? Some people who were your contemporaries. Would that be okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. And you mentioned him earlier, S.D. Jones.
Very, very, very well-mannered man, a big guy. Unfortunately, he was to get a break. He was supposed to get the tag titles with Tony Atlas at one time.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That didn't happen. Well, I shouldn't have said it. But apparently, something happened and they didn't. He was he hung on as long as he could in the business. You know, he was a family man, and he was he was one of my closest friends, as a matter of fact.
Oh, okay.
And and unfortunately we lost him, early on. He was a young man when he passed. He wasn't that old, and it's unfortunate, but he was a great guy. He was a hell of a worker. Everybody respected him, and he got along fine with everybody.
Your former manager, Jimmy Hart.
Jimmy Hart, one of the mouth of the South, Daddy. He loves everybody. Everything's beautiful, baby. But I learned a lot from him. He took me under his wing, and I talk to him to this day, and we're still very close personal friends. And he's quite a guy. He knows the business inside out. If there was anybody that I would pick to be a manager or a friend, even, it would be Jimmy Hart.
One person I saw, and I knew that you had a mini feud with him in '88. I didn't realize you had so many matches with him until I was looking at your match list. George Steele.
Jim Myers, yes, God bless him. Well, he was one of the guys that I enjoyed working with most because we call what we call working snug. We really hit each other. We really kicked each other. We would, grab holds. It would be, and he enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it. And he was, again, one of my mentors. He would help me out, and again, he was a hell of a guy to work with. He knew the business inside and out, and those are the guys that you have to respect the most because, again, it goes back to what I said. You give respect, they show you respect. And he respected me, and I respected him.
You also worked a lot with...
do you remember? I got a story. Do you remember Mine?
Yes.
There was a doll. He had a doll, and he used to say Mine, and that was the name of the doll. And sometimes I would take the doll at some of these venues, and I would throw it on the ground, and I would drop elbows on it, and throw it around the ring. And he would get mad, and he'd come over and kick my butt. We had some matches like that, too. Yes.
Another one you worked a lot with, Coco Beware.
Coco Ware, God bless him. Yeah, him and I still stay in contact. Another guy. Well, see, I think what Vince had in mind was to bring in a lot of, and I use this term, with all respect, smaller in stature guys, to bring in the next generation because he knew that these guys that he had, these monsters that he had in the ring, were going to be soon gone. So, and he knew that he probably wouldn't be able to find guys of that stature in the future. So I think it was either an experiment or foresight on his part to bring in guys that were smaller in stature.
Okay, I've never heard sort of that. He's always sort of painted as somebody who loves the giants. Yes, he was. He always loved the monsters. He always loved the bigger guys. Still to this day, he feels that way. Mm-hmm. I assume I can't speak for him, but I assume he always, and so do fans. I mean,
that's how I got hooked when I went to my first wrestling match. These guys were all over 6 foot tall. They were all over 250 pounds, and they were, and they were wrestling in a ring and doing bumps and doing flips and all that stuff. And that's what hooked me. I said, boy, these guys, grown men, doing this stuff. And Blackjack Mulligans and Jesus, Baron Sakunas, and those guys were all huge, big men, And that's what hooked me.
Did you have a favorite growing up?
A favorite? Oh, gee. I guess I was a mark just like everybody else. I had my favorites. Jay Strongbow, of course. He was the biggest baby face, I guess. Victor Rivera was one of my favorites. I don't know if anybody remembers him. He was back in the 60s. Baron Sakuna was one, but my favorite, I guess, like everybody else, I have my favorites. I guess Bruno, the champion, whoever was the champion, Pedro Morales, who was the champion, because that's what I was, through the TV, watching who I was supposed to like the most, and that's how it was. I was a fan.
Right. Another one.
But in the business, getting to know them, they were all about the same. They were businessmen. They were athletes, and they did their job.
One other thing I wanted to ask you is, how did your cameo at WrestleMania 30 come about?
Was it a commercial?
Yeah, it was. I think you did like a backstage bit with some of the other.
Yeah, a little commercial. Yeah, a little commercial. Well, I don't know how that came about. I was got a phone call one day, and they said, we'd like to invite you to WrestleMania 30, and are you interested? And I said, yeah, sure. We negotiated. They sent me the tickets. I went down there, and they asked me if I would do that thing, and I said, sure. And I did it with Hacksaw, I think it was, and Sergeant Slaughter, Ricky Steamboat, Jimmy Hart. We were all in it, yes. And that's how it came about. So you never know. That was years and years after I'd been out of the business.
And you look the same.
But everybody remembered me. Yeah, everybody remembered me. Yeah.
That was the one thing that blew my mind. You looked exactly like I remembered you.
So that's great. That's great. That's great. Well, anyway, I enjoyed it, and I went to a couple others after, and then I wasn't asked in war, so I guess they were done with me, whatever they needed to be had done.
So that was shot earlier in the day?
Huh?
Was it shot earlier in the day, like as a pre-tape?
Yeah, it was a pre-tape, yes. We had a couple of takes. Yeah, it was pre-taped, yeah.
There's...
Well, not too far in, it was like maybe 40 minutes or an hour before the show started. Someone came up with it, and we all did it, and it came out good.
Nice.
They were happy with it, and they aired it. So
there was something that I forgot about, and I was going through again the match list, and a name that came out that I completely forgot that he was even there in '87, and I wonder if there was a plan to do a long program with you and him, Mr. T, the Special Enforcer.
Well, I have heard that he was supposed to do that. Yeah, we were supposed to do a little thing. I was going to, interfere and give him crap. But he didn't like the scheduling, because it was every night. It was every day. It was travel. And apparently, and I don't know this for sure, but the rumors I heard said he didn't want to travel like that. But the real reason was he was scared of Danny Davis. What are you laughing at?
No,
what are you laughing at? He didn't want to mess with Danny Davis.
Of course not, because as soon as he took off the mask, his peripheral vision was so much better. That's why he won so many more matches.
That's right.
It was the mask that was holding you back all that time.
That's right. Oh, geez.
So then you get into this program with Sam Houston. Was he fun to work with?
Yes. We got we did some crazy stuff. We did a lot of stuff. He was good to work with. He was. We had some. We were matched. It was a good match. It was a good match. Him and I. I mean, not the fighting match. The match. It was a good combination, I'd say, and we did well with it. So, and of course, he was the brother of Jake the Snake. You know that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He comes from a wrestling family. His father was. They called him Grizz, big guy.
Grizzly Smith, yes.
And, his sister.
Rockin' Robin
was Rockin' Robin. So he came from a family of wrestling family, and we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of good times together, and he was good to work with.
When you went back to being a referee, was that something you were happy to go back and do?
No, I didn't like that at all. No, that was foolish. I thought it was anyway, but I did it. I'm a professional. But it wasn't long after that was all for me.
Yeah, but you were still
that's what I'm going for most.
But you were still a referee for I think at least a few years after that. So you were still.
Yeah. I did what I had to do, to make a living, and that was it. I just did what they wanted me to do.
Because there was certainly
I
a
wasn't
lot.
happy with it, but
because there was a lot more life to your character, for sure.
Yeah, but then things were changing in the wrestling business. Things were they wanted to go in a different direction,
mm-hmm.
and they did. Of course, when Hogan left, everything had to be shifted in a different direction. So a lot of guys who had been being groomed for some stuff all got stopped, and they went a different direction. So, and I happened to be caught up in that group of guys, and if they had, I don't know what would have happened, but when Hogan left, everything went in a different direction, and that's part of the business. You could be on top today, and tomorrow you get the phone call, after a match and say, "Look, we're going in a different direction. You're no longer needed, or we're not going to go with that, with that angle." So that's what happens. That's the wrestling business.
Mm-hmm. So what would be your favorite moment of all the many moments that you've had? Like, what is sort of the one thing that, like when you reflect on your career, it's like, man, I can't believe I did.
I was in Poughkeepsie, New York, and I mentioned this earlier, and they asked me, they told me that I was working with Bruno Sammartino and his son with Steve Lombardi, Brooklyn Brawler.
Mm-hmm.
And I was quaking in my boots. And I went in the ring, and we had the match. And afterwards, I was told that Vince wanted to see me in his office. So right away, I thought that I had messed up. Bruno wasn't pleased. I had done something wrong, So I walked around a little bit, and another guy told me, "Look, Vince wants to see you right now," So I worked up the courage to go in the office, and Bruno was sitting there, and Vince started to talk, and Bruno said, "I'll tell him." And I said, "Oh boy, I thought I was fired. This is it." He got up, he shook my hand, and he said, "I told Vince that they need 100 more guys like you." It was a great match. Thank you very much. And that was from that point on, I knew I made it in wrestling, and that changed the direction of Mr. X. I think had a lot to do with it. And every time I saw him in the future, in fact, I saw him at WrestleMania 30. He told that story to everybody, and I thought that was one of the best times in my career when that happened to me. So that's a good one.
Yeah, no, I can't think of almost anything better than that. When someone you grew up watching just endorsed you to your employer, I mean, like, what could be better than that?
No, you can't. There's nothing better than that. That was a ticket for my future.
Mm-hmm. I always sort of felt bad for David Sammartino because it just like living up to that name. I can't even imagine the mental anguish he was under on a regular basis.
Who's that?
David Sammartino, just being the son of Bruno, and like, how do you live up to that?
Well, he was a great kid, a great guy. He was a kid, he was young. He was my age, like that. And he had the ability and he had the charisma, and I don't know what went through his mind or why he got out of it, or whether it was because his father wanted him out or he wanted a family life, or I don't know what the reason was. But, maybe that was it, Kirk. Maybe you hit it on the nail on the head when you said, to live up to his father's reputation. That must have been pretty tough. But in the wrestling business, you don't know. Mm-hmm. And I don't blame him for doing what he did. I don't know his reason, so I've heard that he's very happy, and
well, that's all that matters.
His decision. That and he has he raised a family, and he had a good way of life. I guess he got a good job and a career, and that's what he wanted to do. God bless him.
All right. So if you can promote your book again, how can everyone get a copy of The Life of Mr. X?
You go to dangerousdannydavis.com and follow the link, and you'll find pictures there and my book and other books that Mr. Casanova has co-written, and that's how you get the book. And I will send it from my office. I will sign it, and I'll personally send it to you. So dangerousdannydavis.com, and I encourage everyone listening to go to Dangerous Danny Davis on Facebook and like my page so that I can communicate with my wrestling fans. And I want to thank him in advance for all my being a fan all those years. And I always say at the end of any interview I do that the fans are the greatest, because without them, we would be nothing. So I think there should be a Hall of Fame for the wrestling fans. So,
will you sign it as Mr. X?
I will sign it as Mr. X. I'll sign it Dangerous Danny Davis and Mr. X if you'd like, and just request what you want on the page, and
nice.
I can do that for you.
All right, it was a pleasure. It's not often I get to talk to someone that reminds me of one of the better parts of my youth.
Kirk, it's a pleasure, my pleasure, and I hope to see you soon or hear from you soon. But please, go to my page and at least like me on Facebook, and if not, call me once in a while and just say hi.
Absolutely, and you know where to visit.
Keep in touch. All right, I'll do that, Kirk. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks so much, Danny. Take care.
All right, bye-bye.